Welcome to the College Football Bros. I'm Michael Newman.
I'm Ryan Newman.
And I'm Trey Newman.
All right, this is part 3 of our head coach rankings week. We did the ACC on Monday, the Big 12 yesterday, Tuesday, and today we're going to cover the Big 10. Let us know your thoughts on our rankings in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube, and let's get into it. So, Trey, who is, so 14, 13, 12, we all kind of had different orders here, so we're going to assign each coach to the person who was highest on that coach. So, Trey, you were the highest on who ended up number 14.
I was, and number 14 is Mike Locksley of Maryland. Now, he is 8-43 as a head coach, so I went out a little bit on a limb to put him a little higher. But remember 2 years ago they started 2-0, putting up a ton of points, and they crushed that ranked Syracuse at the time. But then they were just dreadful the rest of the way. But last year they showed a little bit of hope. They went 2-4, but lost a game in overtime. Not amazing, but this ranking for me is mainly because of how well he's starting to recruit. They finished 18th in the country last year, which is really impressive for Maryland. I feel like there's just some hope brewing in College Park. I feel like he could at least, even if he's not a great coach, he could luck into some wins here. They return some production and could be an average team this upcoming year.
Yeah, I will say he was last year as well, but last year it was kind of a dead last. It was like not good. This year, I can see why you put him 12th. This is a pretty strong number 14 to have because you laid out the case pretty well there. But moving on to number 13, it is Bret Bielema from Illinois. Of course, he is returning to the Big Ten after a long run of success at Wisconsin many years ago. And his Arkansas tenure, of course, wasn't good. I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as people remember, I think. He did make 3 bowl games there, so maybe I haven't downgraded him tremendously since then and kind of returning to more familiar territory. So I had him 12th. I'm not amazingly optimistic, but I think he can recruit well there. I'm somewhat optimistic.
Yeah, I do too. We'll see what happens, but I'm kind of with you on that one. All right, let's move on here, guys. Let's go to number 12. We have Mel Tucker from Michigan State. I guess I had him at the highest here.
Yeah, you did.
I did. I don't know. It's not that far-fetched for these kind of bottom 3 guys here. Recruiting, I thought I was going to make the case here that he was low, so it's going to sound like I'm saying some bad things, even though I had him higher than you guys, apparently. But, yeah, the recruiting is not that great. He hasn't really accomplished anything as a head coach before, only 2 years, a little 1 year at Colorado, and it's okay, and not the greatest start, obviously, or Sparty. He's tough to judge. There just isn't a whole lot to go on, and, he can certainly shoot up the rankings. I wouldn't be shocked if it didn't, but there just really isn't any reason for you to put him much higher. Like, why? Unless you're a Sparty fan and believe in him. Like, what is it?
He has not proven yet to be good or bad. It's just kind of a total unknown. And he walked into a total year 0 situation at Michigan State. There was, you couldn't have expected him to do much of anything last year. So I'm fine with him at 12.
So that leads us to, I think is this a typo? Is this number 1 or, it's 2-1.
He's number 1 twice.
Oh, wow. Number 11, Scott Frost of Nebraska. Oh, Frosty. When Nebraska hired him, and I think as a casual fan, of course we're Cornhusker fans, but we all thought he'd be in the top 5 of this list pretty much each year. It's really kind of sad on our part. I still think he can be a good coach, but he just hasn't been dealt necessarily the best cards during his time there. But the fact of the matter is he's just flat out underachieved and needs to do a better job at developing talent and maybe even upping the recruiting a little bit.
Yeah, 3 years at Nebraska, the team hasn't got any better. The recruiting has been, the rankings are fine, but he loses so many players. There's been players transferring away, and it's just there's UCF. His UCF tenure is obviously incredible, so that's why he's not lower on this list. But it's hard to have him much higher when there's just been no progress.
Yep, it's sad.
It really is.
It is very sad. All right, moving on to number 10, Jeff Brohm at Purdue. I am the highest on Brohm. I had him 7th, which is pretty high, but he did a great job at Western Kentucky. And then at Purdue, he took over a total dumpster fire. They had won 3 Big Ten games the previous 4 seasons combined. So they were very, very bad. And his first 2 years there, Purdue went 9-9 in conference, in a tough conference in the Big Ten. So amazing improvements. He's recruited overall very well. The last couple of years, they've been worse. They did have some injuries and some bad luck in close games, but still, they've underachieved for sure on the field. But I guess I haven't downgraded him quite as much as other people because of those excuses.
Yeah, that's fair. I think maybe he's getting a little bit of a tough draw, maybe just because of some injuries, like you said. So it's an important year here for him. There's definitely some production coming back, quarterback wise, and I just also don't know if he's made some of the best. You always talk about coaching aspects, like coaching hires, like assistant coaching. I don't know if he's really ever been able to support himself with the great coaches around him, especially on that defensive side of the ball. So that's a knock that I've had for him. He just hasn't had the greatest assistant coaches. But anyways, let's move on here to number 9. We got Greg Schiano from Rutgers. Jury's obviously is still out here on Schiano the second time around, but it couldn't have really gone off to a much better start than he's done. I mean, they went 3-6 on the field this past year, much more competitive than they had been. Recruiting is obviously much improved. The year the class they got coming in this year, 41st, which is definitely a big jump from what they were. But 2022, they're currently sitting at 6th right now. Now, they're not going to finish 6th, but there's no reason why I don't think they can stay up in the top 20. Maybe I think that's it could happen. Realistic goal, which for Rutgers is a great accomplishment. So, I mean, Schiano's got them on the right track. Things are going smooth right now. I'm kind of just waiting for a hiccup. I just feel like some sort of hiccup is inevitable. Things have been pretty smooth. Everybody knew they weren't going to be that great. So 3-6 was everybody's looking at, oh yeah, that was pretty good. But at some point it's going to have to really pan out. It's not going to just be smooth sailing. Something's going to happen, and he's going to have to prove himself. There's going to be adversity at some point in my eyes.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, like you said, couldn't be a better start.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And any improvement will be welcome at Rutgers, and this is as good of a situation as you could ask after 1 year for them. All right, moving on to number 8, Tom Allen of Indiana. I really don't think he's amazing, but I just can't discount how the team has played the last couple seasons, how much the players seem to love him and rally around him. They play with the chip on their shoulders, and his personality really seems to carry through the team. I wouldn't necessarily start a program with him, but going 8-5 and then 6-2 last year when you're Indiana in the really tough, brutal Big Ten East with no expectations, it's hard for me to ignore.
Yeah, he's done a great job. There's no doubt about it. I want to see more consistency for maybe a longer period of time here, but it's hard to deny what he's done. I mean, Indiana never experienced success, so any amount, you got to give Tom Allen a lot of credit.
Moving on to number 7 on the list, it's PJ Fleck at Minnesota. He's a tough one to rank. He did a great job at Western Michigan, of course, and in 2019, Minnesota had a banner year, winning 11 games, and recruiting has improved under him. So there's a lot of positive to say, and he's a young guy. But his 3 other seasons at Minnesota have, been kind of mediocre. So I think this is a pretty good spot for him.
Yeah, I'm kind of not super high on Fleck either. That one good year at Minnesota came with some fortunate bounces. That was definitely a very fortunate 11-win year, and sometimes you earn that. But I just need to see more consistency for me to move him ahead of guys that are just about to be coming up here, like the Kirk Ferentzes and the Paul Chrysts. Can't put him ahead of those guys yet.
Yeah, but I will say he was one of the hardest for me to judge in the Big Ten because I could make a case on him to be a little bit higher or to be a little bit lower. He was difficult for me to peg.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, move on here, guys. Let's go to number 6. We got Paul Chryst from Wisconsin. It's hard to deny success. I mean, he's 56-19 there, 37-13 in the conference. Won a Cotton Bowl. He's won an Orange Bowl. You know, obviously Wisconsin is a good program, and I understand that people like say, hey, it kind of runs itself. A lot of coaches could go there and have success, and that's true. But hey, man, he's still winning. He's winning either way.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, so that's, you got to give him some credit. And had some very good wins. I mean, we're talking about New Year's 6 bowl wins here. So there's, you know, this past year they had some tough hand. Their quarterback got hurt, Jack Cohn, so they went with a freshman and struggled a little bit. I mean, they were still on 4-3. It wasn't like they were awful.
And they got hit hard by COVID. So
right, yeah. So they had some trying times. So this year you kind of just threw that away, and I think they're going to kind of bounce back in 2021 with having a good year. So, I mean, I got to give Chryst a little bit of the credit of this. He's done a good job.
Yeah, I think when we make these lists, of course, the three of us each make our own list and we just average them together. And I think when we put the average list together, it kind of comes out better than, you know, when I look at that list, it's better than even looking at my own. But Here's an example, because I had Paul Chryst 9th. I guess this is just sort of a hill I'm going to die on. But I really believe it. So, well, I just think Wisconsin, you mentioned like just the kind of built-in culture that it seems like everyone's going to succeed there. And my evidence for it is, all right, let's look at how Wisconsin coaches do elsewhere. So you look at Bret Bielema, of course, he was great at Wisconsin, goes to Arkansas, and as we talked about, you know, it was bad there. And then look at Paul Chryst himself. Right before he got to Wisconsin, he was at Pitt. He went 6-6 3 years in a row. He was worse than Dave Wanstedt before him there. He was worse than, you know, Pat Narduzzi has come and upped it immediately after Chryst left. So I guess I just see his success, you know, more tied to the Wisconsin machine. But, you know, I like I said, I'm dying on that hill. I don't feel like super passionate about it in that you guys had him 4th or 5th or whatever you had him. I'm not going to say you're wrong. Like, that might be right. I'm just kind of calling it how I see it.
Fair enough. Fair enough, Mike.
And I will say the recruiting, with the recruiting stepping up these past couple years,
Yep.
he could easily, you know, they have a good year this year. He might, you know, jump a few slots for me.
Yeah, because that really has been the missing link to the Wisconsin machine is they hadn't recruited this well, at least up to this point. So, all right. So this leads us to number 5, Pat Fitzgerald of Northwestern. You have to appreciate what he's done at his alma mater, given how tough of a job it is in the Big Ten. You know, it's historically a really terrible program, but just about every other year he manages to make them relevant. They've won a bowl game in 4 of the last 5 years, ranked in the top 20 3 of the last 4 years, including 10th after this past year. And, you know, it's just like I said, every other year, because just when he has a down year, you begin to write them off. And then he bounces back after developing another team into a winning one. It won the West Division 2 of the last 3 years. You know, it's really hard to predict coaching success, but you would think he would do great or better things at a bigger program, given his track record.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a winning record in Big Ten play in his career there. I mean, that's just... at Northwestern, that's quite an accomplishment. I had him at 4th. I don't know what Michael had him at, but
probably 5th or something. Yeah,
I think we were.
He's a proven great coach.
Okay, going to number 4, Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, and things. I think I mentioned this in maybe the Big 12 episode, but things had kind of fallen off a bit for Kirk Ferentz in the early 2010s. I mean, not in a big way, but a little bit, enough to where he was probably lower on this list. But the last 6 years, it's been a revival. And the last 3 years in particular, 3 straight top 25 finishes. Recruiting, you know, just like at Wisconsin, Iowa has upped their recruiting game as well. So that's big. He's just a solid coach at, you know, not a super easy place to win big. So we'll see. The only question right now is we'll see how issues with culture affect him moving forward. But that's about the only question.
Yeah, there's, you know, I'm in envy of it right now. I wish Nebraska was as stable as Iowa. So he's done a great job.
Yeah, because they're never really flashy, but they're just tough and consistent.
Yep. Mm-hmm. No doubt. All right. Well, let's move on here to our top three. Leading us off, maybe a little bit of a polarizing figure here. At number 3, Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Hey, a race last year, and this is I think everybody would understand, or at least most people would.
Yeah.
Most people would. Hey, he's 49-22 overall there. He's 34-16 in conference, so he's still got a good record, still doing well. He's had a good recruiting class coming in this year, so it's not like that's really slipping too much. And now, if he does have another bad year, okay, yeah, obviously then we'll have to adjust and probably slide him down. But I can't just punish the guy off of one bad year, and we all know the challenges that this year have had. It is a little concerning that he hasn't been able to get the offense elevated as much as he would have hoped. And the other concern, obviously, now is just the defense. Like, that slipped majorly, and he let go of Don Brown. But I have faith in Harbaugh. He's proven it at multiple stops, college, pro, different conferences. He is a good coach, and he gets his teams to a high level. Has he been elite? Close, but not quite. He hasn't been able to go over that hump, but he's still a very good coach, and I think he's worthy of being in this top 3.
Yeah, what you said there about the multiple stops is what probably gets him to 3rd for me, because you look at the guys we ranked just below him, Kirk, Ferentz, Pat Fitzgerald, undeniably done very good jobs at the schools they're at, but I'm kind of ranking in a vacuum, and I've seen Jim Harbaugh do it every single stop he's been. They immediately get much better, including Michigan. They were losing 5-6 games every year before he got there pretty much, and he immediately had them as like a top 10 or 15 team. And they haven't been as good as we expected, and maybe even as good as Michigan should be, though we say should. They had a lot of struggles before he got there. So 4 top 20 finishes in 6 years. They've won 10 games 3 times with him in a really tough conference with, tough division, tough schedules. He often plays Notre Dame in the non-conference. So, and the point that I think will really hit home with maybe people thinking maybe he shouldn't be 3rd. Well, I think you're probably going to be okay with James Franklin being 2nd, who, of course, we're about to get to. Well, their records since Jim Harbaugh got there in Big Ten play, basically identical.
Yep.
So I don't see a problem with Harbaugh being right behind him.
Harbaugh's a little better.
I think rational minds would agree that if you had to start a program right now, or you were needing a new head coach in the open market next year, like, Harbaugh would be a guy a lot of schools would want and would welcome. All right, so Michael, you just touched on it. Number 2 is, of course, James Franklin at Penn State, and there might be people that jump on us for having him this high because of last year's rough season, but remember how unlucky he was early on last year. I mean, the close Indiana game, and even with it being rough, you alluded to the records. They were 42-11 in the 4 prior years, playing in 3 New Year's Six games. He continues to pull in top 15-ish recruiting classes, and he'd be a guy that I think a lot of us would like to play for. He does need to get that offense back on track, no question about it, especially to avoid the Nittany Lion Boo Birds. But I look at him, again, as if he was on the open market tomorrow. I can only think of really about 6 or 7, 8 programs that wouldn't want him.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't even mention the job he did at Vanderbilt. He's proven it too at 2 different stops, taking tough situations and elevating them like multiple rungs. At Vanderbilt, finishing in, I think he had 9 wins 2 years in a row.
Yeah, like, you look 9-4 2 years in a row.
Before and after, it's just been not even close. Like, they've been the worst program, among the worst programs in Power 5. So add that onto his resume too.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to number 1 on our list, though, it is Ryan Day of Ohio State. And I honestly could understand if you didn't have him number 1. He's hard to rank because, it's only been 2 years and he took over. You couldn't have asked for a better situation to take over. They were like, Ohio State was very strong. They were recruiting extremely well. But But I will say he's also since then done as well as you could possibly ask. He's made them even a little bit better than they were under Urban Meyer. And as a coach, offensively, he seems to be kind of Lincoln Riley-esque, where it's just guaranteed you're going to have an amazing offense. So because of those things, I'm okay with having number one, and I did put him number one myself. But I guess the one knock is that we haven't seen him, just because he hasn't had the opportunity, but we haven't seen him take over a tough situation and make it great. So I wouldn't call someone crazy for putting James Franklin ahead of him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just do give him a lot of credit for elevating the program from where it even was. I mean, the only 2 losses that he has are to Alabama, of course, in the national title game, and then to Clemson in the semifinal the year before. So what else could you really do other than maybe win a national title? But that's, I mean, a tough order when you're going up against Alabama this year. So not sure that was going to happen. And then, LSU last year was pretty destined to win it. So he's just done a great job. There's no denying. I have number one for sure.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Let's, for the YouTube viewers, put up our rankings again of all 14 Big Ten coaches. Ryan, what are your kind of general thoughts here?
Yeah, I think maybe with this conference, I mean, it's a great coaches in this conference. There's a lot of depth as far as, we got Jeff Brohm all the way down at the 9-10 range or whatever. I had him at 10th, and I still think he's still a good. I think Jeff Brom's still a good coach. It's just there's a lot of good coaches here, but I do think this is one where you can kind of almost see this list flip flopping here. I think there's a lot of potential from the guys down low. I could see Scott Frost hopping up. I could see Jeff Brohm making another run, coming back up. Greg Schiano might just rise back up if he takes Rutgers again. PJ Fleck at Minnesota, he's still got some good positive momentum going there. So I could see them jumping up ahead of the guys like Kirk Ferentz and Paul Chryst, and Tom Allen. I see those guys flip and flop. So I just think there's a lot of room for movement here. But overall, great coaching candidates here.
Yeah, I think of the 3 conferences we've done so far, I mean, you could make an argument, but I think this is the strongest group of coaches. Yeah. You talk about having Jeff Brohm down at 10 and even Mike Locksley at 14th, like we said. Like last year, this year he's a strong 14. Like he just had the 18th recruiting class. So
yeah,
not bad for number 14.
So we're kind of alluding to it. I want to ask you guys the question. So of those guys around 10 to 14 on our list, who would you put your chips in to make the biggest jump in the coming years?
Oof.
Like if I was asked the question, I kind of thought about this. I think the way the recruiting has gone, I think Locksley has maybe potentially the biggest upside, but as a coach, it's tough to try. It's tough to trust him. I might go with Michigan State. I think that program is too good to be that poor over the long run, but we'll see.
Yeah, Mel Tucker, and I think he'll pick up recruiting. I think he was year one. We've talked about this. It's tough. It was tough for all year one coaches to recruit in this kind of COVID environment. But his first recruiting class at Colorado was very good, and I think maybe year 2 that'll start to show up at Michigan State. So maybe him. Maybe I'm with Ryan with Jeff Brohm. Well, I already ranked Jeff Brohm 7th, so
you did.
Yeah, I already think of him higher than that. But maybe I kind of believe that he'll get it turned around at Purdue. Like I think Purdue is in the low 30s and SP plus projected for 2021. Like I kind of believe in them.
Yeah, there's just not one team where I'm just like, that's not going to work for sure. Like, some other conferences I feel like we talked about, it's like, nah, it ain't happening. But I mean, Bret Bielema, even with me, like I could see him getting Illinois to be decent. There's nothing crazy about that. I could see Scott Frost finally maybe getting it to click a little bit at Nebraska. Like that's still possible. They have a lot coming back this year. They could be decent. I don't think it will, but trying to temper my expectations here this year. But I think there's potential here for a lot of these programs. It's a tough league, man.
Yep. Okay. Well, that'll do it for our Big Ten head coach rankings. Like we've said, leave a comment below. Let us know your biggest disagreements. If you're watching on YouTube, give it a thumbs up if you liked it. And we'll be back tomorrow with the Pac-12, the Conference of Champions. So we'll see you then.
You've been watching the College Football Bros. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube and in your podcast app for college football content all year round. For bonus episodes and access to our Discord chat, join our Patreon at patreon.com/collegefootballbros. Thanks for watching.